The commission is about to begin its next session on super-delegates. The debate here today is going to be over whether or not super-delegates are going to be bound by the state election results. And we'll be narrating the meeting as it goes on. And if you have any questions, put them in the Facebook comments section. Eric can send them to you. But meanwhile, we'll let the meeting get started and we'll give our little color commentary throughout it.
Thank you. I now ask Patrice Taylor to call the roll, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Baker? Here. Ms. Bauer? Mr. Berman? Ms. Flores? Congressman Fudge? Ms. Harris? Mr. Green?
Ryan, can you tell them, so far they haven't given us any sound from the PA system, so you're...
Okay, well, right now they're just taking a roll call.
Mr. Newport? Mr. Neary? Mr. Roosevelt? Here. Ms. Ruiz? Ms. Turner? Mr.
And we're joined here by the Washington Examiner's Laura Barone Lopez,
Who's going to comment?
who will be providing color commentary.
All right.
There's an anime convention going on in the same hotel that the DNC is meeting.
And I'd like to start today by acknowledging Chairman Perez, who's here. We're very thankful for his participation.
Are you getting audio yet?
And more than that, for his leadership of the Democrats and the National Party. So we're really glad he could be here with us and look forward to hearing your remarks.
All right, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I want to start off by saying thank you for all your hard work. This was an immensely important exercise. It was labor intensive, and everyone came to it with an open mind and with a remarkable set of ideas. And so I want to say thank you to all of you. I want to say particular thanks to our co-chairs, Jen O'Malley Dillon and Larry Cohen. We've been meeting regularly, getting updated regularly, brainstorming regularly, and I can't say enough wonderful things about both of you. You have both entered this enterprise with a spirit of bold passion, a spirit of ingenuity, a spirit that understands that this is the most serious stress test on our nation's democracy, perhaps in our history, and the work of this Unity Commission is so critically important. And so Larry and Jen, thank you so much for what you have been doing. It's impossible to overstate the importance of the work that you've been doing and everybody else here has been doing. This is I come to you both with a sense of remarkable sobriety, given what's happening in Washington and around the country in the era of this president, and also a sense of optimism born out of what we've seen on the ground. I mean, you look at the chaos and carnage that we see every day from this administration, and the stakes couldn't be higher. This tax bill that people like Congresswoman Fudge and others fought against is just an absolute abomination. It is a break for wealthy people, wealthy corporations, at the expense of virtually everybody else. The attack on the Affordable Care Act, 13 million people potentially losing health care, all in service of a tax cut for large corporations and wealthy people who don't need it. They tell us that there's no money to reauthorize the state children's health insurance program, but yet they want to eliminate the estate tax, which is a boon for the 1% of the 1%. And you see what's happening overseas, where we've become a laughing stock around the world. Other countries have figured out how to handle this president. You shower him with, you roll out the red carpet, you appeal to his ego, and then you take him to the cleaners. And that's what happened in China. That's what's happened elsewhere. And yet our allies in Europe and elsewhere, rather than having our back, this administration stabs them in the back. And that's why we're a much less safe country. We're a much less safe democracy. And that's why this work is so critically important moving forward. And so we all understand the seriousness of the task at hand. And yet I also come to you with a sense of optimism, because we've seen in 2017 what we can do when we're united. We watched these elections. The last time we won the governor's races in New Jersey and in Virginia in the same year was 2005. And we saw what happened in the House of Representatives a year later in 2006. We saw what happened in both New Jersey and Virginia, but in other places. We saw what happened when we are united. We saw what happened when we organize. We organize early, we organize everywhere. We saw what happened when we lead with our values, when we go into places like Virginia and say, healthcare is a right for all and not a privilege for a few. Voters responded to that. Healthcare was the #1 issue in Virginia by far, and the Democratic Party led on that issue, and that is a big reason why we won in Virginia and elsewhere. And so we have a lot to look back on in 2017, and it wasn't simply New Jersey and Virginia. We've proven that we can win elections virtually anywhere. The special elections in Oklahoma that took place this past summer, 3 special elections in beet red Trump districts, and what they all have in common is we won all 3 elections. Elections in New Hampshire, a state Senate seat that we hadn't gotten in the Democratic side since 1984. A special election down in Florida where the Republican won last year by a double-digit margin, and Annette Tadeo won that race. We see what we do when we lead with our values. We see what we do when we organize. We see what we do when we listen, and when we make sure that we take the term off year out of the lexicon of the Democratic Party. We've already gone to school on many of the lessons and mistakes of the past. And one of the lessons that we learned from the past is the mission of the Democratic National Committee must always be to elect Democrats up and down the ticket from the school board to the Oval Office, and we have done just that. And with the help of this commission, we're going to be able to do that at even better scale, because the recommendations that you have put forth today are remarkably important in moving forward as we turn the corner. I believe, again, that Democrats can win everywhere. And the motto of our partnership with our state parties, we call it every zip code counts. Because, again, we understand that we can win everywhere, and we have demonstrated that in elections that have taken place this year. We also understand that we've got to spend money on infrastructure. We haven't spent a dime on television at the DNC. Our investments have been focused on organizing and connecting directly with voters. Through our Resistance Summer program, led by Deputy Chair Keith Ellison, we knocked down over 1 million doors to invite Americans of all walks of life to join us. We made those investments in Virginia, up to about $1.5 million in Virginia. Again, $0 went into television. Everything went into organizing, went into making sure that the tech tools were there to help parties, to help our friends in the progressive ecosystem. And the same thing in New Jersey. Our investments were able to help people up and down the ticket. It was an honor to campaign on behalf of House of Delegates candidates, because as I said to Ralph Northam early on, I don't simply want you to win, we want you to govern. And the best way to govern is to flip the House of Delegates. The last time Democrats won this many seats in the Virginia House of Delegates was the late 19th century. It wasn't a coincidence. And the 15 Republicans who are about to become former members of the Virginia House of Delegates are all men, replaced by 11 women. Remarkable. History made, including the first 2 Latinas in the history of the Virginia House of Delegates, the first Asian American in the history of the Virginia House of Delegates, and the first openly transgendered person in the history of the Virginia House of Delegates. We can win elections when we are organized, when we're running candidates everywhere, and when we're leading with our values. And so that's what we've learned. That's the progress we've made. That's the momentum. We need to scale that. And we need to make sure we're doing that everywhere in 2018 because we can win back governorships and state legislatures. I was with the Democratic Attorney General's Association yesterday, and I was also with the DLCC yesterday, again reiterating the message that the new Democratic Party is focused up and down the ticket, and we're working to organize everywhere. And so I believe we can win everywhere, and I believe that we can win everywhere as long as we are continuing to organize and continuing to put in place the recommendations of this remarkable commission. And so, as we shift into this next phase of the commission, I want to take just a moment to tell you some of the things that we've already put in place because I think it's really important, and they're inspired by many conversations I've had with people in this room. Because we recognize that we need to be looking toward 2017, which we've been doing, but we also need to have an eye on the future. We need to build a party that can win today and sustain those victories tomorrow. We need to make sure that we're preparing now for the 2018 elections, but we're also preparing ahead for the 2020 elections. And as we think about 2020, there are many, many things that are very important. As we've spent a lot of time learning the lessons of the past and learning from our mistakes, areas where the DNC fell short. I think it's so critically important heading into 2020, and that starts now, that the DNC does not put its thumb on the scale, either in fact or in perception. Nothing the DNC or our party officials do should give a primary candidate an unfair advantage. Toward that end, we announced a while back that one innovation that we're going to do to make sure that we are true to that admonition is that we're going to announce our debate schedule for the Democratic primaries well in advance of when we know who all the candidates are, so that there is no perception that there's a thumb on the scale for any one candidate. I know there are other things we can do, and that's why we are in this commission. And I'm committed to making sure, for instance, that all of our joint fundraising agreements are transparent and available to all of the candidates. We need to make sure we give voters more opportunities to participate in our primaries, and you're doing just that. The recommendations here on the primaries, I think, are some of the most important things we can do. It makes absolutely no sense to me to have a voter registration deadline that's on one day and a deadline to change your party affiliation that's 60 or 90 or 100 days earlier, or even one day earlier for that matter. That makes no sense to me. I suspect that makes little or no sense to anyone on this commission, and that's a really important reform that I look forward not only to adopting with this commission, but then to implementing. Because it's one thing to adopt, it's another thing to make sure we move forward with our recommendations. We also need to make sure that we remain vigilant in making sure we expand opportunities for eligible people to vote, not contract them. My work as a civil rights lawyer has given me a front row seat to the fact that voter suppression is a permanent part of the Republican playbook. The sooner we understand that, the better we respond. They've been talking about this for decades, not just for months. And they've been implementing it through not just voter ID laws, but through many other pernicious vehicles that are making it harder for eligible people to vote rather than easier. That's why we need to make sure that both voter protection and voter empowerment, defense and offense, are part of our playbook. And these recommendations here of the commission, and I commend the chair and the co-chair for the work that they've done in this area, because there are too many working people who can't vote in this. We've had a robust dialogue, and I want to thank everybody who has been working on the issue of caucuses, because obviously we want to make sure that if you're a shift worker, you can vote in a caucus. We want to make sure that if you're a member of the military or someone else who's been left out of the process, that we can do that, that you can vote, that you can make sure that your franchise is exercised. And there's been remarkably important discussions here. I think opening up that caucus process, consistent with the recommendations of this commission, are going to be game-changing. And I applaud all the work of the commission. And I applaud the work you've done in the area of super-delegates. As you know, in 2016, super-delegates made up almost 15% of the delegates in the commission. And at that time, when you were negotiating the Unity Commission, both Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders agreed on the mandate passed there to provide for a significant reduction in the number of unpledged delegates. And I'm excited about the fact that the recommendations here are going to reduce that by over 50%. And that is so critically important. But finally, and I shouldn't say but, I should say finally, if we want Democrats to win and stay in power, we have to reform our parties in ways that rebuild us from the ground up. Our Resistant Summer effort was a down payment on that effort. The effort at grassroots organizing. We're now at Rise and Organize, and we're going to continue this. And again, I want to commend my friend and colleague Keith Ellison, who's been an indispensable part of that conversation. We've been making investments in our state parties, making investments in down ballot races, working with our colleagues in the progressive ecosystem. Some of these organizations don't have a chief technology officer, but what they have is tremendous energy. And when we harness that energy and use our technology and use the tools that we have at the DNC, that's a force multiplier, because we all succeed when we all succeed. And as we saw in Virginia, New Jersey, and elsewhere, we are at our best when we are united, when we have our oars in the water and we're rowing in synchrony. So that's what we're doing, and that's why we're continuing to make sure that we make these investments. I'm proud of the fact that we are now providing 1/3 more every month to state parties. And it's not a blank check. It's accompanied by accountability measures. We're working together with state parties and critical stakeholders in each state to develop that strategic plan for success that enables us to win not only this year, but for many years to come. I'm proud of the technology infrastructure we're building at the DNC, the voter protection infrastructure, all of those things that enable us to work across the aisle, across states, to make sure we're empowering folks. And so we need to continue to empower our diverse grassroots Democrats at every level and make sure that they have a seat at the leadership table. Let's build on our recent small dollar fundraising success. And let's stand by our pledge to ban corporate donations from PACs whose goals conflict with our platform. We've come a long way, but I was born tonight, I was born last night. We still got a long way to go. And this commission is, I think, a critical part of that process moving forward. And I am confident that, Senator Kennedy once taught me many things, but he said, Tom, we are at our best when we are united. And unity doesn't mean unanimity. We may not agree on everything, but when we recognize that what unites us far exceeds what our differences are, that's when we're at our best. That's why Senator Kennedy had such a distinguished career of accomplishment, moving the ball down the field for working families, making sure that we protected the right to organize, making sure we protected women's rights, making sure we protected immigrants' rights. When we move forward in that spirit, and I'm confident that we agree on many, many things here. And I'm equally confident that there are areas where we still may have some disagreements. But I know that what unites us far exceeds what our differences are. And I know that moving forward, this report is going to make a big difference. And you have my assurances that I'm going to work with all of you to make sure that it doesn't gather dust. Because today, and the work you do today and tomorrow, is the end of one chapter, but it's the beginning of an equally important chapter, the chapter of implementation. I want to make sure that when history looks back on your work, our work, that history records this as a moment in which Democrats came together around a vision of opportunity for everyone, of empowerment for grassroots communities, of construction of a pathway not only for victory in 2018, but for long-term sustained success. That's when we're at our best. And so I want to say thank you to all of you, and I look forward to hearing the final results. I know we've got a lot of work to do today, but I have a lot of optimism moving forward, because this is a great group of folks who know what our North Star is. Our North Star is taking back America, making sure we build an America that works for everybody in every community. When we do that, we're at our best. So thank you, Jen. Thank you, Larry. And thank you to everybody on this commission for your great work.
Hey, so he did mention Super-delegates. Commenter on YouTube, he said that, kind of previewed that this report's going to recommend a 50% reduction in Super-delegates.
DNC and working on the party. I just want to commend you and your team and the hard work that you have undergone and the adjustments and the new evolution of the work you're doing across the country. And I think, you know, seeing the amazing wins in Virginia and the down ballot victories that we're seeing is no small part to your leadership of your team. So thank you for that so much. All right, so we are here at the final meeting of the Unity Reform Commission. And I want to just first start by saying thank you to the commission members. As you can imagine,
Jennifer O'Malley Dillon is the chair of the commission.
It's the most sexy of jobs that all of us do, and it requires a lot of work. You know, as I was explaining the commission to someone the other day, I said this is a workers' commission. We are, every single person here is putting in the time, not just in these public meetings, but outside of them, to speak with their peers here, to reach out to the grassroots, to really think about some hard, sticky topics and come up with really thoughtful ideas and solutions. And I think that you know, you will see that throughout today and tomorrow. But I just want to commend again the commission for their participation, their passion, and what they believe in, and on behalf of the party and the work here. And I am really confident that what we're going to end up with after today and tomorrow is going to be a report that will help unify the party, but will also bring major reform. Greater reform than I've certainly seen in my time doing political work, and in a way that is 100% on the mark with what this commission's mandate is, to be more open and inclusive, to think about grassroots participation, to make it easier to vote. And so I am confident that we're going to have a good 2 days, but I want to just make sure that we set the tone and that everyone that's here and everyone that's tuning in really understands the work that's behind that and the team of commission members that have put that together. I also want to just take a moment to thank everyone who has come today, and many I see who have been here for many meetings. Thank you for your participation in being here, but thank you for caring about this. And you know, not just the folks that are here in person. We have received thousands of outreach from people in the party, across the country, on thoughts and ideas people have, input that they've shared through the website, and we've taken all of that very seriously. And this is something that, you know, obviously is about all of us. And so we really thank everyone that's here today. You know, as we have started each of these meetings, I think about what's happening in the world to ensure that what we're doing here isn't a siloed effort, but it's really tangible and concrete to the reality that we're facing. And unfortunately, for every single meeting, I have had too many things, as the chair had mentioned as well, that we can point to that the Trump administration and the Republicans are doing that are taking away and hurting the people we care about, that we stand for, and the values that we share. So, you know, as we go through this process, as we have this whole time, let us just remember, you know, as we sit here, we have gone through in just the last, you know, 10 days, everything from the Republican tax bill to more discussion on the Muslim ban to, you know, the conceal and carry gun law, you know, to what's going on with Dreamers, and, you know, the list goes on and on. And I say that to say that, you know, while we are, as, you know, we know on many things we're going to agree, on many things we're not going to agree, and that's okay, but let us not lose sight of what's most important, what is happening out there, and the responsibility that we all have and the party has to build this party, to open its doors wide, to make sure people understand who this party is, who it represents, and the values we share, and that we go win elections. And we certainly have done a good job in doing that so far. We need to continue to do that, because what's at stake is beyond what I think any one of us could really imagine that we'd be in this situation. So let us not lose sight of that and stay focused as we move forward for today and tomorrow. With that, I'm going to hand it over to not someone who I've known very long, but someone who I feel like I have known my whole life, my great friend and forever friend leaving this commission, the Vice Chair, Larry Cohen.
Thanks, Jen, and sandwiched in here between two chairs. I don't know what that would feel like physically, but
A rose between two thorns.
yeah,
right?
there you go. Some
All
version
the
of that.
authors of the Democratic autopsy are here.
I'm not going to
Norman
wander there.
Solomon and I spoke
But
before it started.
great to be here with everyone, and also want to echo the thanks that have been given here, and I think, you know, we need to stay rooted in that in these times. And I know everybody in the room, whether you're on this commission or not, feels deeply that we need to fight for change in this country like never before. And I know that everybody feels that this party is a major vehicle for all of us in doing that. And I think it's in that spirit that we've spent the last 6 months as a group, a little more than that for Jen and I, to try to figure out, okay, given this resolution, and we need to constantly remind ourselves, the resolution that was passed was unanimously passed, 4,500 delegates. Didn't matter if you got there as a Sanders delegate or as a Clinton delegate, it was unanimously passed. And it does set a lot of boundaries. It also lays out these 4 directions that we'll be talking about today. The 4 things, the 4 buckets as we called them, as Tom called them actually in the opening session. But at the same time, that this is really a call for all of us to engage in what I call party building. Not just here in terms of what we're going to adopt, but in terms of what we each do in each of our parties, whether it's, you know, Democrats abroad, whether it's in a territory, or whether it's one of the 50 states. And, you know, I would really stress that, because a lot of the things that we're going to talk about indicate what should happen. The only way we go from what should to what will is with thousands of people saying this must happen. Finally, probably no time will be spent in these 2 days on the introduction, but as somebody who deeply believes in this introduction, I just want to call attention to it. A couple of lines. Democrats must act internally to model our commitment and belief that every vote must count. Democrats cannot wait for a new Supreme Court or wait for a new Congress. And I think this is really key, because a lot of this that we're going to talk about is about the caucus, how's it run, about the primary, how's it run, about the state parties and how are they run, and even the so-called super-delegate decision. And it's really about, are we going to go with the people? Are we going to build a popular party? Not one party, because as we learned from Joe Sandler at the first meeting, we are 57 parties. And there's an obligation to follow the path that I think together we have laid out here in those 57 parties and with the 447 members of the DNC. So I would say that for me and most of this commission, we will mobilize, and we will encourage all of you to mobilize. And that if we do mobilize and build a more democratic, transparent, open, inclusive party, that's the way we will win elections, and that's the way we will win elections in a way that matters to us. Because we all believe here that it's not just the Democratic Party. It's the Democratic Party that fights for freedom. It's the Democratic Party that fights for economic justice. And many of us grew up in places, in my case Philadelphia, where we didn't have that kind of Democratic Party when I grew up. And this means a lot to me on that personal level, that we continue that fight, and that together we can do that. And finally, as the chairman said, we will not agree. There will be votes here, and we will not agree on everything. But you will see, those of you who can bear to stay in the room long enough, that we will agree on far, far more than we disagree on. And whether you're here as a journalist or as an agitator or an organizer, that is really a key lesson. And as a union president for 10 years, we would dwell on this, that whether it was bargaining or whether it was internal, it's very easy to look at what's not in the cup. We better look at what is in the cup first and then what's missing. So with that, I look forward to debate, discussion, adoption, and building a better party than ever. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Larry. Let me spend a few minutes just talking through the process and the meeting today and tomorrow, and then we're going to get started. So, okay. That's Patrice. She's in charge.
I forgot to say one thing, if I could, for one moment. There's a number of folks on the DNC staff that work really hard. They often toil in anonymity. They are working long into the night, and it includes, but is not limited to, Patrice Taylor. So if I could indulge you to give it up for all these people who work so hard. Folks in the back there, Patrice over here. The folks who have been working, can you all stand up? Because we ought to say thank you. Julie in the back, I see you there. The backbenchers back there. Thank you so much for what you're doing. This stuff doesn't just happen out of thin air. It happens as a result of some really hard work from some really talented and committed people. So thank you. And thank you to, I see DNC members and others in the audience. It's always inspiring to see the serial activists who care so much about this. And I think that is tremendous that we have so much interest out there. That is one of the many, many things that gives me great optimism moving forward, because the energy I see in the back of this room here and at this table is mirrored across America. So thank you, all of you who have chosen to come here, and thank you all who are watching via live stream or however we're doing that. And with that, I apologize that I have to go to another event, but I will be monitoring carefully. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so yes, I was remiss not to also include my thanks to the staff, and Patrice in particular, who is someone who not only helped me in a former role get through the Change Commission, but now is helping all of us get through the Unity Reform Commission. So we would not be a commission without Patrice and her team and everyone at the DNC that has worked to put this together. So we're going to spend the next remaining hours of today and tomorrow in our 5th meeting going through recommendations in each section. And you've heard it be discussed as buckets or sections, but we have broken down our main areas of focus of this commission in 4 specific areas: primaries, caucuses, unpledged delegates, and party reform. So that will be the structure that we really take everything in throughout today and tomorrow, and we have been over the series of meetings that we had over the last year. In those meetings, as many of you know, we've been going through robust discussion on each of these topics, hearing from experts, panelists from different states, getting in the weeds on what really is happening and how the Commission's mandate is part of that. And so what we are discussing today is a product of all of that work and discussion that we've had over the past year. And so, the topics we're discussing, the elements that we're discussing are focused in those areas, and also are not new business that we're bringing today, but really are here today because of the extensive work that the Commission has done to bring it forward. Tomorrow, we will spend today going through those. We'll go as long as we can. We will vote on everything that we can vote on and have discussion as appropriate. We will break at periods during the day, and then we will pick up again tomorrow with whatever voting is remaining. And then we will have opportunity to hear from each of the commission members to share their final thoughts for the record about this commission, and we will also spend some time really just talking about what's next. What's the process that happens from here? How does that work in terms of the commission itself, and also the rules and bylaws in the DNC? So that gives you a bit of a flavor for how we're looking at today and tomorrow, and we'll stay flexible throughout the day based on the needs that we have of the commission and our discussions. So with that, we are going to get started, and we are going to start with unpledged delegates, which are also referred to as super-delegates, as our first section. This is going to be the first area of discussion. I will just do, and this will sort of be the format we'll go through today, I will do a couple top lines of just the key elements here, and then we're going to open it up to amendment recommendations and discussion from the commission members, and then we will go through and vote on the elements here in terms of the recommendations. So, just to keep highlighted, and again, we want to spend the majority of today on substance and not on overview. But we spend a lot of time, and obviously there's been much discussion about unpledged delegates. As Larry mentioned, and as we've mentioned, this mandate comes from the convention, voted on unanimously by everyone who is there, which means, as Larry points out, it doesn't matter where you came from, and that convention is the highest voting body of our party. And so while we take the entire mandate very seriously, it had particular resonance in terms of how we had to think through unpledged unpledged delegates. So in terms of the recommendations that are on the table today, we are looking at a series of them. The first, that the Commission concurs with the convention, which reduces the number of automatic unpledged delegates by more than 400, that the Commission agrees Democratic members of Congress, governors, distinguished party leaders should remain automatic unpledged delegates, that all party officials who have a role in the execution of the primary or caucus process in their state should remain neutral in their administration of electoral activities, that the Commission recommends the creation of 3 categories of automatic delegates, 1 which remains unpledged, and 2 which would be bound on the first ballot for the presidential roll call. The Commission has also provided 3 options for addressing the automatic bound delegates for the RBC to consider. Those are pledged pooled vote option, a pledged DNC member and alternate voting option, and a pledged optional DNC member voting option. So obviously there is a lot there and a lot to discuss. That's where we start, but we will go through. We are not going to go through everything unless there's something that we want to amend. So with that, I'm going to open this up for discussion to the Commission and ask for Commission members to begin focus solely on unpledged delegates, and if they want to raise amendments or edits, they can start the process.
Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to move to amend, and this amendment starts on page 3. It is line 33, and to add to the end of the paragraph and decrease the undue influence, real or perceived, that unpledged delegates had on influencing the outcome of the nominating process.
Yep, sorry, discussion on that. Thank you, Larry, for telling me to push my button.
They're learning how to use these microphones slowly. Have you heard anything she's saying? One thing I heard was she wants to reduce the role of superdelegates. She forgot to turn her mic on. They're working on it?
I'll second the amendment.
Just so you know, when I arrived, none of the sound system was set up. I had to set
Yep.
it up myself.
Senator Turner.
I don't know how we're seconding an amendment that we're still on the amendment as I proposed. And so while I understand what you're saying, there was undue influence in 2016, and the Democratic Party would do well to confess that there was undue influence in 2016. And my biggest concern in adding this amendment is that this amendment shows that we recognize that there was undue influence, real or perceived. I mean, some of this stuff is perceived by the public, and a lot of time perception becomes reality. There is a such thing called the invisible primary, and that primary and the influence of these superdelegates served to depress some of the voter turnout during the primary, particularly in California, a state like California, where I was there when that happened. So I want to keep the amendment pure the way that I introduced it.
Just procedurally, I will second Nina Turner's amendment so that we can proceed with the discussion. It hadn't been seconded yet, so it's seconded now.
Do I need to restate what I said?
And we need to vote, correct me if I'm wrong, Helen, on Maya's amendment first, which is an amendment to the amendment, and then, okay. Is there any other discussion?
And then the only other question. Apparently my mic wasn't working before. Did you guys hear my amendment? Okay. Okay.
Let me add, in support of Nina Turner's amendment, the term undue influence is then qualified by real or perceived. And so I think that the concern is dealt with adequately by the real or perceived, and I don't think there's any reason to alter the amendment as it is.
To be clear, my proposed amendment still stands.
Yep. Okay, so we're going to vote on Maya's amendment to strike undue. All those in favor, please raise your hand.
I got 10. What'd you get? 10. Okay.
Okay, so we have 10 raised, and so that passes.
Take the nose, you don't know.
Oh. Okay, all those, sorry, not in favor.
All those opposed.
Yeah, I'm asking again, so I'm sorry. This is my first time doing this, but so.
The question's called, it's undebatable.
They wanted to vote.
Right, exactly. Okay, so all those opposed to Maya's amendment to strike undue, please raise your hand. Okay.
Right.
Yep, okay, so we have 10 for, 6 against, so Maya's recommendation to amend Senator Turner's amendment is adopted. Okay, so now we need to vote on the amendment as adopted. All those in favor?